following program is from NET, the National Educational Television Network.
We find it hard to America. We don't get much news from there, just scattered stories. Brazil elected a new beauty queen. They have trouble with their money. They had some sort of revolution. There's nothing to give any continuing sense of real people leading real lives. Also, we are ignorant as children. Try these facts. South of us, there is a nation larger than the United States, if you don't count Alaska and Hawaii. They speak Portuguese, not Spanish. About half the population of South America belong to Brazil. Also, many problems. In the north, tropical jungle, drought, poverty, overpopulation. Down south, wealth and industry. In the middle, emptiness. And yet, out of all of this, there is emerging an underdeveloped nation at the point of takeoff in its development, where the struggle begins toward progress without external assistance. Brazil certainly has a long, hard way to go. The level of income and the standard of life among the poor in its backward northeast are as low as anything that can be found in our hemisphere. Their misery is morally disturbing and politically dangerous. For a time, the voice of the communist rang louder and louder there, and his hand was raised to inhibit United States efforts to bring help to these troubled people. Brazil's money has long been a mockery. It was hard to see how they were losing 80% of its value in 1 year. As this happened, it seemed some kind of crack-up must be at hand. There were no coins anymore, just great wads of paper bills. To buy $1 US took 800 cruzeiros, 900, 1,000, 1,500, up and up, skyrocketing to disaster. Investment slowed down, halted. Brazil's then president, Jean Goulart, appeared cool to the United States, warm to communist nations. There was uneasiness in the land. There were incidents of violence, people protesting against the state of affairs, protesting against the things the government had not done, the things it might do. No one was sure of Goulart's intentions. Many said he had no policy, but was merely an opportunist. Many feared he would try to increase the power of the presidency. He was wooing the enlisted men of the armed forces. The time seemed ripe for political upheaval, perhaps for suppression of liberty. And then, in March 1964, political upheaval did come. First one Brazilian state, and then portions of the army announced they would no longer be ruled by the government of Goulart. The president declared he would put down this rebellion. There were movements of troops. No shots were fired, but civil war seemed to be coming. And then the tension was lifted. The armed forces had all moved to the side of revolution. Goulart had fled the country. Some state governors were deposed. Many people, avowed communists and others, were put in jail. There had been no resistance, no bloodshed. The Congress elected a general, Humberto Castelo Branco, as president. The new government promised sweeping reforms. They said glorious times were coming. In Brazil, there was rejoicing. The United States Department of State manifested deep satisfaction over the change. But where exactly did the revolution take Brazil? United States Ambassador Lincoln Gordon was on the scene. Did the revolution solve any problems?
Well, the revolution really was something which averted a disaster and created new opportunities. It in itself, of course, provided no solutions. Now, the problems that the government inherited after the revolution are enormous, were enormous. There were some short-term problems which were a direct inheritance of the previous rather chaotic situation. Maladministration, corruption, a rate of inflation which reached 120% a year during the early months of 1964, problems of that kind. And on top of those were all longer-range problems, which problems arising from the rapid population increase, the need for modernization in agriculture, which in general is a very low productivity in Brazil, very backward, especially in the northern part of the country. The needs for the buildings of road and power, needs for modernization of education, needs for health, needs for growth and improvement in all respects. Longer run problems. These two put on top of each other in a climate which politically is still, I wouldn't say tense, but a complex one, leave a great deal to be done.
There is so much to be done that it is difficult to calculate how far Brazil has come along the road to self-sufficiency. Brazil still ranks as an underdeveloped nation, which is another way of saying one that depends on other nations for its well-being. The standard way to stay underdeveloped is to let your economy remain one of the gathering and exporting of raw materials. In that way, it is guaranteed that you will be forever at the mercy of the international markets, and guaranteed that no matter how many good times there are, booms will always be followed by busts. And the men who yesterday were busy loading coffee or sugar or bananas or hides or minerals will tomorrow be standing around idle, waiting for conditions to improve. The depressed northeast area of Brazil is a sad monument to plantation economies of the past. In the 16th century, this region was the most prosperous one in the land. Brazil was a Portuguese colony then, and had what amounted to a world monopoly on sugar. There was a boom which lasted for 100 years. There were large plantations served by large populations of slaves brought in from Africa. Then sugar production elsewhere started up, and the boom was followed by a bust. Now there are too many people for the income of the land. There is an aching poverty. As in the colonial days, a few people monopolize large holdings of land. Sugar production limps along. Slavery was abolished in 1888, just over half a century after Brazil had gained independence as a nation. But many people of the Northeast might as well be slaves so far as the conditions of their life are concerned. Hunger hovers behind, along with disease. Illiteracy is the rule. Before the revolution, the communists attracted the greatest notice here by protesting against this misery. Now that they have been silenced, the voice of the church emerges, putting pressure on the government and pressure on the big landowners for economic and social reforms. The landowners wait to see what the government may do. And the misery remains, shouting for change. Change will likely come, for these people are determined to climb. They no longer accept oppression as an inescapable fact of life, like rain or the blistering sun. The cowboys who ride the wide ranges of the northeastern backlands are traditionally men of spirit. Old men among them remember times when they rebelled and the government had to call in the army to put them down. It was not clear what they were rebelling against, except that it had something to do with the townspeople having all the money and the cowboy having no money, no land, nothing. They glare at money as if it were an enemy. And well they might, for as matters stand right now, money is just that. Consider those wads of bills. What are they worth? Less today than they were last month, next month likely less than now. So if you have money, the best thing to do is get rid of it as fast as you can. Not in a bank with inflation cutting into it all the time. No, you have to buy something. And one of the best ways to salt away your money is to buy land. This creates another category of land shortage. For just as there are people in some areas of Brazil who are cursed with land hunger because the land is overcrowded, so there are people in other areas kept hungry because the land is kept empty. In northeastern Brazil, a new kind of attack on the land problem is being mounted. Groups of peasants are helped by United States advisors to form agricultural cooperatives. They learn how each farmer can be an independent owner but can share the help or the tools of the rest where this is more useful. The United States is offering Latin America many kinds of help under the aid program called the Alliance for Progress. Some of this help is financial, but the main idea is that Latin countries should do most of the work and that aid should serve as pump primer, helping to stimulate reforms. Some charge that our efforts produce no reforms, that in consequence our building houses, schools, hospitals, or roads, are feeding the hungry, are doing any of the beneficial things that are done under the alliance, really amounts to doing things these countries might better do for themselves. In short, that aid brings no change. In Brazil, the United States has selected the Northeast as prime target for assistance. As symbol and example, it would seem that helping peasants to stand up for themselves and farm their own land does constitute taking a shot at social change. With so much to be done, individual efforts tend to look small and unavailing. Geraldo Daneman is a banker in the northeastern state of Bahia. What measures work to start an economy changing?
Well, once you can create a stimulus for industrial activity to take place in the area, there's one thing that industry can find, and it's raw materials. Another economic factor is the human resource. It has to be trained, but it is found there. Once you start using those human resources, what happens? The per capita income is going to go up. Therefore, purchasing power is going to go up, and that is an additional attraction for industry.
How do you start this interaction of human and material resources? Maurice Asimov has an answer. He's a professor of engineering at UCLA, and taking a team from there and from the University of Ceará in northeast Brazil, he went into the backlands of that state to study what the area had in resources and what its needs were. Then he took his plans to local citizens and asked for money, $1 million worth of money in the impoverished Northeast. Their first reaction was astonishment, but before Asimov was done, the community had scraped up the money in exchange for stock in 5 companies. The 5 began to grow, each useful in a particular way. A radio plant, for example, was a good idea because the radio is a vital source of information and entertainment in the far country. The thing to bear in mind is that these are all legitimate businesses, with Brazilian boards of directors financed by local investment. Like many new enterprises, the radio plant had to take on new workers and train them. The assembly line